All right, so let's talk about Brexit and all of the scheming that is going around it. Brexit has a lot of fluff around it, and it has had a lot of fluff around it ever since 2016. A lot of people back in 2016 were talking about how Brexit was this great way for the average British person to just tell off those evil elites over there, those oligarchs, those faceless bureaucrats in Brussels. And the more that you study Brexit, the more that you realize it really is just a scam. And in this scam is a very effective way of getting people to think that they are fighting the elites, right? By voting for Brexit, you are telling off the elites. You're just insulting those evil elites, those buggers over there, those faceless bureaucrats over there. Vote for the Brexit. Vote for the hard Brexit. Boris Johnson, he's one of the boys. And they made people think this. They put out this perception, and a lot of people have absorbed this perception because it appeases a lot of the angry sentiment that a lot of people in Britain have. They read the Daily Mail, they read, I don't know, the Sun or whatever, and they think that if they don't vote for Brexit, England is going to be conquered by a bunch of brown people. So the more you look at Brexit, the more you realize it really is just a propaganda apparatus that has very effectively gotten people to think that if they vote for Brexit, they are going to have their country back, whatever the hell that means. Now, people think that by voting for Brexit, they are going to defeat the elites, right? The elites. Most of these leavers can't even give you a name of one of these elites. They may name, like, I don't know, Juncker or one of those EU politicians, but that's as far as their knowledge can go, usually. It's just from what I have seen, just from my own observation. And while people think that it's all about fighting the elites, then you have the Boris Johnson crowd. And those guys are being backed by a bunch of elites, and we actually can read their names. Because Boris Johnson is a part of a funding organization that funds politicians who are Tories or members of the Conservative Party. Now, in Britain, Tory and Conservative are used interchangeably. So when people are talking about the Tories, they're actually talking about the Conservative Party. And this funding organization functions very similarly to a secret society. Members are actually knighted, and conversations are very secretive. They are kept classified, and they aren't put on any sort of record, at least not for the public. In order to be a member of this fundraising society, you have to pay £50,000 a year to the organization. I'm not joking, £50,000. Now, if you are paying £50,000 to an organization that funds politicians, you aren't exactly the type of person that's worried about putting food on the table and all that stuff. You're not going to be a part of that crowd that's going to be saying things like, oh, we have to vote for a hard Brexit because if we don't, the people are going to get screwed over by these faceless bureaucrats. People are worried and deeply concerned about putting food on the table. Don't you understand? We have to fight these elites. Like, you're not going to be worried about the elites if you're putting £50,000 into this funding organization. So the people who are running this organization, they are part of the elite. Now, the name of this organization is called the Leaders Group. The Leaders Group. And there have been a number of studies done on this group. Open Democracy did quite a detailed article on this fundraising organization. And I'm going to read to you guys some excerpts from this article from Open Democracy, and it basically will illustrate to you. It will convey quite clearly to your noggins the reality of what is happening. The people who have been just praising this whole Brexit movement, praising the Leave movement, acting as though, Brexit is a way for the people to finally have their country back and fight off the evil elites, or, I don't know, give the old bird to the elites or something like that. It'll convey the message quite clearly that they're actually helping the elites by backing Brexit. And even if you don't support Brexit, I mean, the elites are going to be there, right? I'm not saying that if you vote stay that you're fighting against the elites. The elites are always going to be there, just as the poor are always going to be amongst you. The rich are always going to be amongst you, and they are always going to be manipulating things in order to make certain crises and certain situations happen that would be to their financial advantage. So let's get into this article. So here are some lines from this article that I found quite revealing. It says here in the beginning, an elite Tory dining club that enjoys direct access to Boris Johnson has given more than £130 million to the Conservative Party since 2010, Open Democracy can reveal today. More than 80% of funds raised by the Conservatives for the general election so far has come from the secretive Leaders Group. The Leaders Group, which has included wealthy individuals linked to Russia, the fossil fuel industry, and climate denial, is open only to those prepared to give the Conservatives at least $50,000 or £50,000 a year. Sorry, I'm an American, so I'm thinking in dollars. In return, I mean, America owns all the money anyway, so I guess it doesn't matter. In return, they receive regular private dinners, lunches, and drinks, receptions with the Prime Minister and the other senior Tory figures, including leading cabinet ministers. Now, isn't that interesting? These big parties, right? These guys love their big parties. They love their big dinner parties, all these guys. And if you look at the political realm, it doesn't even have to be just the liberals, right, or the Democrats. If you look at any sort of activism movement, doesn't matter if it's conservative, it doesn't matter if it's liberal, Democrat, Republican, right-wing, left-wing, far left, far right, whatever, communist, militarist, monarchist. If you look at any sort of activism movement, activism organization, the people who are doing all the hard work, they really believe in the cause, right? They're passing out pamphlets, they are making phone calls to politicians, or they are confronting people in rallies. The people who are doing all of this hard work, right? They're doing the dirty work. The work that a lot of people aren't really willing to do because they're afraid that it would get them fired from their jobs. Those people are true believers. They really believe in the cause, right? For the most part, unless they're like paid trolls and they're just doing it for money. But the people who are doing it as volunteers, those people really believe in the cause. But there's always levels of power in these activism groups, right? You always have the people who are doing all the work. Those are the people who are on the lowest part of the dimension of activism, if you will. They're the true believers, right? And they really think that the people that they are working for, the people who are running the organizations, they really think that those people really care about their work and appreciate it when they really don't. The people who are at the top of these organizations, they are the ones who run everything. Those are the ones who are getting all the money. It's like the pro-life movement. You have all the people who are, pro-life rallies, are passing pamphlets, all that stuff. And those are the true believers, right? But it's like this carrot and the horse effect, where the horse is the activist who's doing all the work, and the person who is controlling the activist is putting the carrot. The carrot is their idealism. The carrot is their fantasy that they think, well, if they keep running, they're finally going to get the carrot. In this case, it's if they keep working, they're finally going to make their ideal into a reality. The person who's doing the whipping are the ones who are running the organizations and getting the money. And you can see this sort of thing in any sort of activism movement, any sort of activism situation or phenomena. The pro-life movement is a perfect example. You have people who, they're like, oh yeah, I'm pro-life, and they're going to the rallies, and they're doing debates, and they're confronting people in the streets, and they're doing all these things. And those people are true believers. But then you have the people who are running these pro-life organizations, and these organizations are getting tens of millions of dollars. And I have actually heard of pro-life leaders impeding anti-abortion legislation, trying to stop, going out of their way to stop anti-abortion legislation. And they say, well, we're not really ready for that. Or we don't really believe in putting women who get abortions in prison or something like that. But while they say these things, the reality is that their real motive is they know that if abortion is gone, they're not going to, they're going to lose their gravy train. So, this is the reality of activism. And this is the reality of politics, right? You have the people who are, vote Republican, and they're knocking on people's doors. But then you have the people who are getting all the money, and they're acting like, oh, if you vote for me, you're going to be making your dreams into a reality. And these people love their dinners. They love their big parties and their fancy smanchy restaurants and their catering dinners, catering events. They love all that stuff. So it says here, the Tory party is increasingly dependent on a handful of funders involved in finance and particularly the hedge fund industry, like George Soros. Boris Johnson has attended at least 6 leaders group meetings since 2016. Very interesting. 2016, the year that the Brexit vote took place. So this has been going on since the Brexit movement really took off in a significant way. And it really goes to show you that this entire time, these elites, these hedge fund guys, these big investors have been backing this. So when you vote for Brexit, you're not voting against the elite. You're not voting against the elite. Sorry, I got to do the British accent. You're not really voting against the elite, my darling. All right, you're voting for the elites over there in the hedge fund places who are making all the money, and they have the what you call it? The bloody stock market. They're making a lot of money off that. All right, love. Okay, so it says here that Anthony Bamford of the JCB Construction Empire has given more than £5 million to the Conservatives since 2010. The Ferrari-driving, private jet-owning, yacht-sailing billionaire, who has personally donated £80,000 to Boris Johnson in the last year, is estimated to be worth over £4 billion. The Tories' elite donors include the Russian businessman Alexander Timerko, who calls himself a friend of Johnson's, and Lyubov Chernukin, the wife of a former Kremlin government minister. A number of senior conservative donors have received honors, including knighthoods and peerages. So it works kind of like the Masonic Lodge. Like, oh, he's a knight. He's in this degree or whatever. As well as Theresa May, David Cameron, and George Osborne, frequent attendees at leaders group events have included important figures in the recent Conservative administrations: Michael Gove, Ian Duncan Smith, and Saeed Javid. I'm assuming this guy is Pakistani, by the way his name is spelled. Were all present at numerous leaders group meetings between 2013 and 2018. You mean, and this is what I find so fascinating, Theresa May, David Cameron, George Osborne, right? Let's stick with the first two, because these are the guys that everyone knows about, right? These are the most generally known figures in British politics, Theresa May and David Cameron. People hated David Cameron because, he was against Brexit. Theresa May supposedly was against Brexit, right? She supposedly was working, exerting all of her efforts to prevent Brexit from happening. But they're also part of this club. And so is Boris Johnson. It's like Trump and Clinton, right? They say, oh, Trump, he's going to drain the swamp, and he's going to do this. And I always find it interesting how culturally similar British and Americans are. I think they tend to be more, correct me if I'm wrong, but just from my own observation, and you guys can give me your opinion on this, the Americans, and especially English people, they tend to be more credulous, more gullible to politicians than other Westerners. It's just from my own observation. But it's like Trump, they say, oh, he's going to drain the swamp, and he's going to clean out the elites, and he's going to clean Washington, and he's going to do this, and he's going to get, he's going to give us the whole freaking solar system. And it's like, well, hold on a second, but he gave money to the Clintons, and he was friends with Bill Clinton, and I think he gave money to Hillary Clinton as well. It's like, well, he's going to drain the swamp, but he's going to the same parties as his supposed political rivalries. Same thing with Boris Johnson. They say, oh, he's Brexit is so great, and people loved Boris Johnson. I think people are less trustworthy of him now, but people loved Boris Johnson. Well, it turns out Mr. Johnson is going to the same parties. He's part of the same club as Theresa May and David Cameron. So are these guys really going to fight the elites? So it says here, in early February 2018, leading conservative lights gathered among the dinosaurs at the Natural History Museum in London. Gathered around the dinosaurs. It's a funny twist on things. It's like we're gathering around the old boomers. At the Natural History Museum in London for the party's black and white fundraising bowl. Guests dined on slow-cooked beef and drank expensive wine. The highlight of the night was the auction, as well as dinner with Michael Gove and Sarah Vine for £120,000. Guests could also bid for a 500 bird, pheasant, and partridge shoot at Morristow and Bickley estate near Plymouth, sponsored by Andrew Law and his wife. Law, who is one of the hedge fund industry's most successful money managers, has given almost £3 million to the Conservatives since 2010 and attended at least 14 Leaders Group's meetings. He is one of a number of successful hedge fund managers among the Tories' biggest donors. More than 40% of the Leaders Group donors owe their wealth to investment firms, a combination of finance, hedge funds, private banking, and private equity. And then it says here, collectively, these donors have given more than £50 million to the Conservatives since 2010. Firms that describe themselves as hedge funds are particularly influential. Just 5 wealthy donors who have been involved with hedge funds have donated more than £18 million over the last decade. Lord Michael Farmer, co-founder of hedge fund Red Kite and one of the most regular attendees at Leaders Group meetings, has donated over £6.4 million. Now get this is very fascinating. His son, George, is also a member of the elite group of Tory donors. George Farmer has also donated to the Brexit Party and headed up the British wing of the controversial right-wing US student group Turning Point. Remember Turning Point USA? What's his face? Ben Shapiro is a member, or he's part of that whole network. Turning Point USA, guys. Charlie Kirk, Shapiro, Boris Johnson, the Brexit guys, they're all part of the same apparatus. It's all part of the same network. That's why when people actually, no one's really told me this so far, but in case someone does, if someone says, Ted, you're an American, why are you talking about British politics? Tell that to Donald Trump, who's my president. You know how people say, he's my president. Trump is my president, and he was hanging out with Nigel Farage and saying that Brexit is great. Oh, and he said that he loved Boris Johnson as well. So if you're going to tell that to me, go ask that to the President of the United States. The United States government has been involved in backing Brexit, and that was made quite obvious by the fact that Trump expressed his support for Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson. The U.S. government wants, or at least the Trump administration, wants Brexit to take place. There's a whole bunch of other stuff on here. So it says, like, for example, energy companies are also heavily represented among Tory Leaders Group donors. All but one firm is involved in fossil fuels. Ian Taylor, boss of the world's largest oil trader, Vitol, has given almost £2.5 million, as the Financial Times noted in a 2018 profile. Taylor has done business with some of the best savory regimes in the world, Castro's Cuba, Saddam's Iraq, via Africa, the Balkans, Central Asia, etc. Ayman Asfari, chief executive of UK oil and gas firm Petrofac, has given the Tories nearly £750,000. Both David Cameron and Theresa May were criticized previously for lobbying the Bahraini government on Petrofac's behalf. Now, there was an interesting article about this subject from The Guardian, basically saying how Brexit is a move that would be to the advantage of the wealthy elites and not to the average person. And it made a very interesting observation. So it talks about this guy named Philip Hammond, who is the former chancellor in Britain. And it says here that Philip Hammond suggested Johnson was pursuing the interest of financial backers set to gain from a no-deal Brexit and a major escalation of tensions in the Prime Minister's own party. Now look at what Mr. Hammond says. Mr. Hammond says, quote, Johnson is backed by speculators who have bet billions on a hard Brexit, and there is only one option that works for them, a crash-out no deal that sends the currency tumbling and inflation soaring. So in other words, get a no-deal Brexit, a hard Brexit to take place, get the economy to crash, have the British pounds inflating, lower the value of the British pound, buy tons of pounds, millions upon millions upon millions of pounds, and then once those pounds begin to increase in value, because inevitably it does increase in value, you've just made a lot of profit. This is called speculation. Financial speculators, they are legal scammers. And what they will do, these big-time speculators, what they will do is they could actually bankrupt a whole country. And this is not the first time that this sort of thing has taken place. This is not, my point is that this is not something that's unique. Remember what happened back in, I want to say it was the 1990s, the Black Wednesday situation. Was that Black? 1992, September 16th, 1992, Black Wednesday, George Soros and a bunch of other big hedge fund guys who were following George Soros, they bought tons of British pounds, got a whole bunch of loans, all that stuff, and they crashed the whole Bank of England. They crashed it. And that's what escalated, or that's what, it acted as a catalyst for Britain to then leave the European Monetary Union, which was the precursor to the European Union or the Eurozone. And the Germans were very happy about this. It's very interesting that there was a German official who came out in an interview before Black Wednesday took place, and he said that one of the currencies in the European monetary system is going to crash. And he didn't specify which currency that was, but for some reason, Mr. Soros, I guess he had some sort of inside information. He knew that it would be the British pound. And so these speculators bought tens of millions upon millions of pounds, and they crashed the entire system. There was actually a financial crash that took place in the 1800s. I think it was the crash of, I want to say 1870, I'm not sure. I can look it up. 1873, there was a crash that affected both Europe and North America. And what helped to accelerate that crash? It was financial speculators. So these guys are just notorious for this. Back in the 60s, this was a big problem, especially for France. The French franc was of a lot lesser value than the German mark, and all these speculators bought tons and tons and tons of French francs, and they then they just crashed the system. Just bought so many francs. You had all this inflation that went on, and then they had so many francs that they then exchanged those francs for German marks. And since the German marks were a lot more valuable than the French francs, they then had enough money with the marks to pay off their loans to the French banks and keep a profit for themselves. So speculators, they have a tremendous amount of power. Hedge fund owners, they have a tremendous amount of power. They have power over the politicians. This is what I find so funny and sad at the same time. You have people who are like, I'm voting for this guy because he's going to bash the elites. He's going to take care of it. He's going to clean the swamp. Or I'm voting for Ron Paul or whoever it is. And it's like, listen, it doesn't matter who's in power. What matters is the one who has the money. The one who has the money is the one who has the power. In this case, the hedge funders, the investors, the people in the energy sector, these types of people, they control the politicians. Bottom freaking line. And, you had Donald Trump. I remember 2016 like it was yesterday. It seems like time just flew by so fast because it still feels like we're in 2016. Well, it kind of feels like we're in 2017 now. But oh my goodness, we're about to hit 2020. Look how the time just flies so damn fast. It's surreal. It really is surreal. It's like that song from Linkin Park where he says, he sees the long arm of the clock ticking and time is going, and he says it's so unreal. It really is unreal. I'm talking about Linkin Park songs. That's how old I am. But yeah, it's the ones who have the money. And the ones who have the money. And I remember back in 2016, it was just a big circus. Trump was there, Brexit, Milo, and Nigel Farage, Boris Johnson, look, the heroes, and Sargon of Akkad, and this and that and this. And now we're in this stalemate. It seems like we're in this stalemate in Europe where it's almost like we don't even know if Brexit is going to occur. Is it going to happen? Is it going to be a hard Brexit, or is it going to be a soft Brexit? You know, the soft Brexiters and the hard Brexiters are all fighting amongst themselves, and then you have the moderates who don't want Brexit to happen at all. These are the remainders, and it just seems like, well, what's going to happen? Meanwhile, you have this Franco-German alliance that's been going on, and the French and the Germans are like, listen, Brexit is taking place. We need to then make sure that the EU is a major security power, a major military power. And what that means is a German power, because when you talk about a European military power, you can't do it without Germany. It's like when the German Empire was forming, and the Germans understood that if they're going to have a unified Germany, they would not be able to do it without Prussia. Prussia is essential. It's the same thing with Europe. It's like, without Germany, you're not going to have any EU military force. So this is about German power, and the Germans are acting like Brexit has already happened, because they're acting as though the British are almost irrelevant now. There was an article that came out today in which the Germans and the French have been talking about making an EU military force, and again, they cite Brexit. And they have been citing Brexit as a pretext for justifying European militarism ever since 2016. This has been going on. Not too long after the Brexit vote took place, there was a meeting, I believe it was in Bratislava, and you had all these EU representatives there, and there was a representative from every EU country except for Britain, which has never happened before. And what was the subject? It was about a European military force. So it's a very interesting situation, and if anything, this Brexit phenomenon has caused an amazing strategy of tension. It's been a strategy of tension. It seems that way, at least, in that it has caused tension between the Germans and the British, or the French and the British. And the Germans are now using Brexit, even if it's not happening, they are using Brexit as a pretense to justifying their own militarist aspirations. So very, very interesting situation. I hope you guys have learned something from this video. You guys just heard some theology. God bless.